to tell you a story tonight, and it's a crazy story. You know, it's just one of those very rare moments in your life where in retrospect you're like, what the hell? And at the time you're like, I guess I'll continue living, I don't know. It's like if you went to the dentist and he asked you to take your pants off, and you're just like, I don't know, you know, I'm gonna make a note of this. This seems strange. I was always discouraged from telling personal stories growing up. I always heard the phrase, don't tell anyone. But not about creepy things. I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. My dad wasn't the dentist or whatever. It would be sort of about insignificant things, like I wouldn't make the soccer team. My father would be like, don't tell anyone. I was like, they're gonna know. When they show up to the games and I'm not on the team and I'm crying. One time I confronted my dad about this, which is tough with my dad because he's a very serious guy. He's a doctor, he's a neurologist actually. And he always sits in this one armchair in our house and reads these thick books. My dad goes through war novels like I go through boxes of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Quickly and aggressively, passionately, and he's just the kind of guy who knows stuff, which is intimidating for someone like me who knows nothing. Because my fear when speaking with someone who knows stuff is that it'll reveal and accentuate that I know nothing. And obviously, I don't know nothing. You know, no one knows nothing. It's just the levels of things we know are very different. You know, my dad knows about the hemispheres of the brain. And I know that if I spill Diet Coke on my laptop, it probably won't start again, you know? And that's why my dad was so disappointed that I became a comedian. You know, he worked his whole life to send me to college so I would learn stuff. And I didn't. And I got a job making fun of him in front of strangers. So that whole plan kind of backfired. But one time I built up the courage to ask him, I say, hey, how come you play everything so close to the vest? And my father says, the more people know about you, the more they can use it against you. Which really sent shivers down my spine. It has that kind of open-ended fear to it. You know that feeling you have when you're driving and you see a cop and you're not speeding, you don't have drugs, but you're just like, I hope he doesn't notice I'm driving. 10 and 2, sitting upright, you know. Well, as guarded as my father, as my mother is open. I mean, she'll say anything to anyone in any context. I was visiting them recently, and I met her at the bank, and she'd been talking to the bank teller for 15 minutes about really personal stuff, and I walked in right at the end, and all I heard her say was, and here he is now! And I was like, oh no, this is a disaster. She's a talker, and I love talking to my mom. You know, we'll talk on the phone for 15 minutes or 2 hours, but at the end of it, no matter what, she'll always say one more thing. But it's rarely anything that deserves to be one more thing. It's always like, one more thing. Ellen from my swim class bought a rice cooker. I don't know if that deserves to be one more thing, Mom. In long division, that's called a remainder. You save up 17 of those, we'll give you a conversation. She's a talker, and I'm a talker, and that's why we always drove my dad crazy. Whenever we would tell personal stories growing up, my father would say, hush. I'll give you an example. I was a terrible reader as a kid. We used to do these things in grade school in Massachusetts called SRAs. You guys have that? Student reading assignments? Yeah, and what they would do is they would post how many everyone had done on the wall, which is a really good way to squash a child's self-esteem. I remember there was this girl in my class named Jamie Burson, and she finished 147 of these things before I finished 2. And I distinctly remember thinking, I think I might be retarded. And then I looked at the wall, and I was like, oh yeah, I am. And in retrospect, it seems so obvious that I just had some kind of ADD. I remember reading these books as a kid. You know, there were 4 rabbits, Mopsy, Flopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. And I was thinking, if you're going to name your rabbit Mopsy, you're really going to name the second one Flopsy? I mean, you want everyone to hate you? And Peter's the only one who made it out okay in the naming process. He's like an investment banker now. He's like, I do not know those other rabbits. And they're like, aren't you Peter Rabbit? He's like, no, I'm Peter Lippens. And he's tucking his ears into a baseball cap. And anyway, while I was thinking about all that, the other kids read the book. So I had some kind of issue. And I remember one night I said to my dad at the dinner table, I said, I think I might be retarded. And my father said, hush. Which is one way to address a problem. That's what he always said whenever we told uncomfortable stories, and so I developed this habit of telling uncomfortable stories. So here goes. When I was 19, I had a malignant tumor in my bladder, but it's funny. Stay with me. Because I'm a hypochondriac. And I think the funniest thing that can happen to a hypochondriac is that you get cancer, because it confirms every fear you've ever had in your entire life. You're like, see? I told you. Remember last week when I was overtired and I thought I had rickets? I was probably right about that, too. There's gonna be a lot of changes around here. It was less funny at the time. I remember I was driving home for Christmas break. I went to school in Washington, D.C., and about halfway home, I stopped at a rest stop to pee, and I don't mean to be graphic, this is just what happened. There was blood in my pee, which I knew could mean like 5 things. 3 of them mean I die, and the other 2 aren't exactly a trip to the Bahamas either, and it was particularly disappointing because sometimes when I'm on road trips alone, I'll have water drinking contests with myself to see how clear I can make my pee. Who's with me? And no, I'll drink all this water, I'll stop at a urinal, it'll be clear, I'll be like, bingo, you know, and so when it was red, I was like, I lost big time. And no, I got very anxious, and when I get anxious, I get that shortness of breath, and that feeling where you feel like you can't breathe, and then you feel like you're gonna die, because breathing is one of the building blocks of living, and I get home around 1:30 in the morning, and my dad is sitting up reading in his chair. He's a bit of an insomniac, and I tell him what happened, and he has a very grave look on his face, because he's a doctor, so he knows about the Bahamas. And he takes me first thing in the morning to see a urologist. Now, I didn't know at the time what urologists do. I mean, I'm 32 years old now, so a lot of my friends have gone for prostate exams and that kind of thing, but when I was 19, I was very naive. So when he said, put your hands on the table, I was very confident that this would go pretty well. You know, I was just like, all right, I can put my hands here on the table. And then what happened was that he stuck his finger in the hat. And I did not know that was about to happen. And so I shouted, I go, oh my God! And he got mad at me. He was like, cut the theatrics. And I felt so bad. I was like, sorry about the theatrics, you know, as though I had intended it, like this'll be my big moment. When he sticks his finger up my ass, I'll prove I should be the star of our town, you know. I don't know how you're supposed to react in that kind of a situation. Even if I were a robot, I'd be like, system error, oh my God. He goes, listen, Mike, you gotta come in tomorrow morning for what's called a cystoscopy. And doctors always dress this stuff up. He goes, it's no big deal. You come in, they put an IV in, you fall asleep, you wake up, you eat a muffin, you go home. All right, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Still a little shaken up from that table thing, but just out of curiosity, like, what is a cystoscopy? And he picks up this rod that's about 4 feet long. And he says, there's a camera on the end of this, and we stick it through your urethra to look into your bladder. And I said, I feel like you glossed over a few details in the initial description. I feel like there was too much emphasis on the muffin and not enough emphasis on the fishing rod you're sticking into my number 3 body part on E's Top 100 Sexiest Body Parts. Next morning I wake up and I feel like I can't breathe again. I go into the hospital and they put the IV in. They couldn't find a vein for a while, which is always fun, you know, just some stranger poking you with a needle and you have to take it like, ah! Okay. Ah! Okay. Eventually she found a vein. Apparently I have one, and then I fell asleep, and then while I'm under, they found something with the scope. So they decide they're gonna keep me under and put me under further so that they can take it out. So they put me under the street equivalent of horse tranks. That's what the nurse told me later. And so I wake up in the recovery room and I'm sky high with my mom, which is not the first time in my life that I've been high with my mom. But it was the first time she knew. I don't react to drugs very well. I'm like the guy, if you're ever smoking pot in a group, who's like, do you guys hate me? Who's at the door? Who's at the door? Who's at the door? Why does my heart hurt? Is that rickets? You know, I'm not proud of that. That's just what I am. And my voice gets very loud, and so I wake up in the recovery room. It's mostly elderly people, but in my mind, it's like a dance club. I was like, this place is awesome! We should come here all the time. I don't know why we didn't come sooner. Dad's always here. Because he's a doctor, you know, and my mother is mortified. She's like, shh. And I was like, shh. Do you hate me? A few hours later, she's driving me home and she has to explain what's happened. And she said, the doctors found something in your bladder, and talk about highs and lows. I was literally the highest I'd ever been, and then I was told I might die, which is like being handed a pizza and then being shot. So I start crying, and because I'm crying, my mother's crying, because crying is a little bit like throwing up. It's a chain reaction, and we get home, and all you can do in these situations is wait. We had to wait a week for the biopsy to come back on the item they'd taken out with the scope. So for a week in my life, I thought I might die, which is an incredible experience if you ever have the chance, because what happens is you'll talk to God, even if you're not sure there's a God. You'll just talk to anyone who might be available. You know, just God, Allah, the elephant thing from Hinduism, L. Ron Hubbard, Harry Potter, you know. I'm brand loyal to Jesus, but I'm not stubborn. But when you think you're gonna die, you try anything. You start going to church a few times a week. You're like, load up the station wagon. We're going to pray for me again. And a week goes by, and the biopsy came back, and it turned out I was very fortunate. They had taken out a malignant tumor from my bladder, but they had caught it early enough so they didn't have to take any further action. Except every 6 months, as a precaution, they said I had to come back for the fishing rod. But it was okay, because afterwards, I could eat a muffin. Well,
if you're like me, you hate missing a good deal. I used to spend so much time looking for coupons online. It took a lot of effort. Then I installed the new Retail Me Not Genie browser extension. Genie does all the work for me, finding deals at stores like Macy's and hundreds of others, then applying them at checkout, like magic. To start saving the easy way, visit retailmenot.com/Genie and install the free Genie extension today.
Whether you're going for peaceful and serene or wild and eclectic, changing the color in your home is easy. Stop into your neighborhood Ace Hardware for Valspar paint and discover the perfect color and all the brushes, rollers, and tape you need for your project. Roll it on with just one coat of Valspar paint and you're done. One and done. Tap your screen now and make color change easier with Valspar and Ace.
Summer may be ending, but the deals are just heating up on eBay with up to 70% off home and fashion. That Adidas gear? Up to 70% off. That patio chair you've been eyeing? Up to 70% off. Shop eBay's end-of-season sale right now and fill your cart with color. eBay.
Smart water is purity inspired by the clouds. And not to throw shade at those clouds, Smart water one-ups them, adding electrolytes for that clean, crisp taste. No offense, clouds. You'll always be our inspiration. Smart water, vapor distilled for purity, electrolytes for taste.
So when I was a kid, it was this bear that would walk in the front door of my house. And as an adult, it was this jackal that would hover above my bed. Well, the sleepwalking got worse. Abby and I graduated from school and we moved to Brooklyn. We had a very small apartment, but it was comfy, you know. We had a big puffy couch and 2 cats, and we made our first major purchase. We bought a TiVo. And one night I had a dream that I was in the Olympics for some kind of arbitrary event like dustbustering. And they told me that I got 3rd place. And I stood up on the 3rd place podium and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I'm new to the sport, you know. Even in my dreams I don't win, per se. In my wildest dreams I place. And they say, actually, we reconsidered and we decided that you got 2nd place. And I move over to the 2nd place podium and it starts wobbling. And it's wobbling and wobbling. And I wake up and I'm falling off the top of our 5-foot bookcase in our living room. And I land on the floor hard on top of our TiVo. I know. And it breaks into pieces, and it was like one of these stories you hear where people black out drinking and they wake up in Idaho, they don't know where they are, they're just like, oh no! Hardee's, you know, or whatever's there. But it was in my own living room, I was just like, oh no! TiVo pieces. And I get up and I go back to bed, and Abby wakes me up in the morning and she says, Michael, what happened to the TiVo? And I say, I got 2nd place. And I'm really sorry. The next story is about my parents. And I was visiting my parents recently, and I don't like them. I love them, don't get me wrong, I would die for them, but if I met them at a party, I'd be like, these people, yeah, this place is beat, we're out of here, you know, because my parents are Italian, but they eat at the Olive Garden, literally. And my dad will show off by pronouncing menu items authentically. He'll be like, I'll have the pasta fagioli, and I'm like, we're sitting in a strip mall between a Build-A-Bear and a Spencer Gifts. You'll have the pasta fagioli like everybody else. You're not special. They make up phrases. I realized this as an adult when I would say the things that my parents said to me as kids to people in the outside world. And they would be like, what the hell are you talking about? I was like, but my mother said that. Oh no, you know, and life, when I wasn't allowed to do something, my mother would say, "Like fun, you're doing that." Anybody ever heard that phrase? Yeah, like fun. Like, that's really confusing for a child, because it would seem like she's encouraging me to do it, you know? She'd be like fun, you're going to the mall. I was like, yeah, like fun. Burger, buddies, arcade, like fun. But then I realized as an adult that like fun was her way of saying like hell. Yeah. Because she's Catholic. And for Catholics, hell is fun. This is the first time I remember sleepwalking. I always had dreams about wild animals when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I had this recurring dream for years that there was a bear walking in the front door of my house, literally opening the front door, which is the scariest part when you think about it. A bear with opposable thumbs. Because if a bear can open a door, the sky's the limit. I don't have a plan for that one. My plan was the door. In the dream, I would hide in the kitchen cupboard with my sister Patty, and it's pitch black, and I'm scared to death, and I open up the door crack to let in some light. I look next to me, and Patty is gone, and she's been replaced by the bear. It doesn't kill me, but it gives me kind of a coy, Jack Nicholson-y look. Like, will I kill you? And that's when I wake up. I had that dream for years, and then eventually I attempted to face this lifelong fear. Patty and I went to Alaska. We went to this place called Katmai National Park, which is one of these places that has so many bears that when you arrive, they take you to what's called bear orientation. And they teach you, and it seems counterintuitive, but if you ever see a bear walking towards you, you're actually supposed to clap and make the bear aware of your presence. Like, I'm right here, bear. I'm right here. I'm Mike, and you're a bear, and we're okay with each other. And when they told me this, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be murdered by a bear, because that seems like basting yourself in barbecue sauce, you know? It's like, I'm right here, bear, I'm right here, and I taste fantastic. I've applied condiments so that I'll be less bland. Patty and I went fly fishing. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but it's much more difficult than it looks, and a river runs through it. We're waist deep in water, we're in the rubber pants, and there are salmon jumping out of the water in front of us, literally jumping, which is what I would do if I were a fish. That seems like a great field trip. You know, you're in the boring water all day, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa! I want to stay here and grow legs and become a human, which is what happened over time. Sorry, homeschoolers. But the salmon are just jumping out of the water, but I can't catch one with the rod. There's this whole kind of maestro maneuver, and if you don't catch one, you feel like an idiot. You're just like, I should have brought a net. Yeah, that'd be a lot easier. You just be like, aha! Just snag them with the net. 1, 2 is a lot easier. And the fishing guide we're with feels bad for me, so he catches one himself, places the rod in my hands, and goes, you got one! And that